Hey.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Meeting Protocol Monthly. It's only the first sentence, and I'm already tongue-tied. Podcast where we chat with some of the coolest people in the biz, and we bring you useful and relevant information about what's happening in the world of meeting planning. I am Dora Figueredo, as always, the head of events and education at Meeting Protocol, coming at you from New Jersey. And one of the coolest parts of being an event professional is that there is no single career path. And those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while already know we've covered this with other folks. There are lots of competencies that we share, exemplified by the fact that there is one CMP exam. We also have an incredible range of skills and diversity of event types. And the skills you grow in one job are probably not the same skills that you would grow in another, right? I know lots of event planners that I learn so much from because what we do is completely different despite sharing a similar job title. And it's possible to branch pretty far from where you begin, no matter where you begin. And there are a lot of event professionals now who can say that they do virtual events. Whereas in 2019, I think you'd be hard pressed to find event professionals who say that they do them, never mind enjoy them, or feel like an expert in them. So today I am thrilled to introduce you to Elena Mendis, a colleague of mine from before my event planning days, who has so much invaluable insight about career transitions, digital events, and the need for work-life balance, which we all need to hear more about. She started at Macmillan Learning as a marketing events assistant and worked her way to become Catchpoint Senior Manager of Field Marketing and Events. And now she is the Senior Events Manager at Lattice, where she runs their entire digital events program. So talk about embracing the digital events change. And so thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, it has been so many years since I have spoken with this dear, wonderful person, and I'm so excited to have her on today. So tell us where you're joining from and the quick background of what got you into all this.
Thank you so much for having me, Dora. It's so awesome to see you, to talk to you. So I am based out of about 2 hours north of New York City in a small town called Milan, spelled Milan, said Milan. And super excited to be here. What got me into event planning? I really just love doing the work that I do every day. I loved my birthday growing up, loved planning other people's birthday parties. I was always our friend event coordinator, and now I get to do it as a job.
Yay! How fun to be paid for what you love.
Love it. So let me give a little background about kind of how I got into this, like on a professional level after all the birthday parties. Um, so I started out at Macmillan, doing kind of a dual role, but really as the executive assistant to the president. This is where I met Dora, and we worked for a subsidiary of Macmillan Publishers that did science textbook publishing. And so, as a part of that role, I really was in charge of a lot of the events around the executive that I managed. And a lot of that was sales dinners that she would go to, author events that the president was involved in. She would make talks at different colleges and things like that. So some of these were really small events, but they were very impactful to the company and to the business, and making these kind of like huge textbook author deals. Um, and then in that role, I also started doing some of this like employee corporate event stuff, really in that like workplace experience realm. So, Macmillan is a super old publishing company. We had folks there that were lifers and been there 20, 30, 40 years, things like that. So I'd plan their retirement parties for like designers that had designed textbooks in like the 70s and 80s, which was
Wow.
awesome. But then also like big work anniversary parties, employee baby showers, just like really on that employee experience side of things. Um, and then something that like was really big that I started to get into also kind of in that employee experience realm was those sales kickoffs that we used to do. I don't know if you remember those, Dora.
Yeah.
But like huge sales kickoff, we get all of the the reps from around the country. We go to like a warm, super fun location in I think it was like February, March, somewhere around there. And then back in those days, we really like we booked everything for them. So, I was definitely a support on those roles. I wouldn't like run the whole thing, but booked accommodation, booked travel, organized dinners for top sales reps, did fun events for sales and marketing so folks could get to know each other. And then, of course, supported the executive that I was managing, the president, on the content level, doing tech checks, slide decks, all of the fun things that go into making like an event really smooth and awesome. And that stuff was really fun to me. Like that kind of like got my gears moving. Like love doing anniversary parties, love doing employee experience stuff, but like this stuff felt really impactful and really real. And then I really started moving into a little bit more on the marketing side at Macmillan, supporting their trade shows. And in textbook publishing, the main appeal for trade shows was meeting authors. So like we had famous authors that would write these awesome textbooks, and people would be big fans of these folks. And so we would, book the talent, right? Our talent, our
Right.
textbook authors at a trade show, right? We build the booth, right? We do the same thing you do at any other trade show. You build a booth, but then you have a textbook author come sit in the booth and talk to professors who are potentially going to adopt their book. So we'd have like Paul Krugman, Stephen Dubner, like kind of like famous folks come to our shows. But like the big thing there is we shipped a lot of textbooks, a lot of textbooks. So part of that was a lot of lifting, a lot of setup, making sure that night people had pens, they were in a good mood, they had their coffee, all of that stuff. And so that was kind of like my main role at Macmillan. And as you can tell, like covered a lot of things kind of in the events realm, but really attached to this kind of like executive side and then moved a little more into the marketing side.
Yeah. All of this is bringing back so many memories. I remember like teachers fangirling over Dave Myers, a
Yes, Steve
psychologist,
Myers.
right?
Absolutely.
At the booth. And also like hearing you say this, just I love how it mirrors my experience in some ways, because I started out as a high school teacher, and that was eventually the reason I went into publishing, was because they hired me because I knew high school teacher needs to be a high school textbook editor. I know you work more on the college side. And I remember being at these textbook conferences, which when you say it like that, a textbook conference, it sounds like dreadfully boring, but I just had such a blast. I loved all of those project management aspects of like bringing people together, figuring out what's going to get somebody to our booth, versus the Pearson booth a few booths down.
Yep.
So yeah, it's truly what got me to love event planning as well. So I'm loving all of this. When we were planning this podcast, you mentioned that you had never seen a virtual events role before the pandemic, specifically just for virtual events, which I think that a lot of event professionals can relate to. And, many of us probably did a webinar here or there, but it was like never the whole part of our work. So how did you upskill yourself quickly enough to become an expert in that place?
Yeah, great question. I think like us as event marketers, we really have this like keen set of skills, especially geared towards in-person events. So after I worked at Macmillan, I moved into like the B2B tech SaaS space. And I really like dove into like marketing events in B2B tech. And a lot of what that entailed was a very specific conversation between sales folks and marketing leads. And so you kind of get into this whole motion of exactly what to do in those places. And then pandemic hits, right? And every one of us had to shift our entire event strategy over to something that wasn't in person, right? You still want the same outcomes. You still want some of the same, you still have some of the same KPIs and stuff like that. But the first thing that I did was I talked to my marketing operations person, and I got to know them really well. Basically, in this like B2B tech SaaS space, that marketing operation person knows exactly how leads are routed. They know how sales is engaging with the leads that you're sending. A lot of this stuff I didn't have as much of a keen interest in with in-person events. A lot of those conversations would happen naturally in person. Sales folks would follow up. But in the digital world, you have less contact between those folks. So getting to know your marketing operations person, that was the first step for me. Getting to know processes within the business, how things actually turn into money in the bank. And then the other thing I did was like the oh shit moment of I got to start networking more than I ever had before, right? Like you go to trade shows, you go to other events, you work in partner spaces, and you meet a lot of amazing event professionals that you're networked with, right? You like kind of know them, but you take all of that away in a digital setting and you really have to kind of go after it. So I was a part of like a professional social group at the time. And in those first few months of the pandemic, we had these weekly meetings where we would all just sit on the call and, you know, scratch our heads and say, like, what are we going to do? And try to figure out things. And folks would give ideas. You know, people worked at very huge companies like Microsoft down to like small startups, more like the one that I worked at. And then the other thing is I asked a lot of questions. I asked for help. We had lots of meetings with our CMO. You know, it was kind of the transition period took, you know, took months for us to really transition to like our full events program into digital.
Got it. Wow. Do you ever miss being in person, or is this like really, do you just really love this?
Oh, everyone misses in person. You know what's great about in person? You get to see people, you get to socialize. There's something challenging about digital slash virtual event marketing that really scratches an itch for me. It's a lot of problem solving in a physical setting. Like I said, like you have eye contact, you have sights and sounds and smells and things like that that you can pike people's interest on for your product. And digitally, you just don't have that. You don't know what people are thinking. You can't see them roll their eyes when you're on a webinar or something like that. So do I miss it? Sometimes. Sometimes I do. But I love the digital world. I love how dynamic it is, how much like kind of fun new things you can do. And then there's also this kind of low cost benefit. In-person events cost a lot of money. Digital events are like exponentially cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I would love to know, so as you were talking, I was like formulating sort of like a follow-up question. I know like we're going
Yeah,
through a script here.
go for
But
it.
if you were to talk to like a person who is maybe they're like right out of college and they've majored in
Yeah.
communications or marketing or something, and they're thinking about going into events, like would you say like push hard to get into a digital event space because like you feel like that is like truly the future? Because you know it's people are so divided. There's some folks who are like
Right.
digital doesn't work, nobody's joining webinars, like we have to be in person. And then obviously like you are seeing great success, right? Like this is
Yeah.
your whole role. So I'd love to know, like, what would you say to somebody who's starting out and not sure where to go?
Yeah, and that's a great question. A lot of the I think a lot of the trepidation around in-person versus virtual is it's a lot of unknown still. And as I see Lattice planning for this year, and what we're going to do with in-person, you know, and the last 2 years, right? It was just so much unknown, right? And there is a I think there is a clear value to in person. I would never say that in person is going to go away. It's not going to go away. People are like ready to hang out. They're ready to learn together. They're ready to network together.
Mhm.
I would say, though, for folks starting out, it's really about your preference, right? there's a lot of like kind of technical strategic aspects of being in the digital space that that you can get creative around in a different way that you can for in person. So if you're a creative person that wants to run around and hang stuff up on walls and order the best food in the city that you're in and find the best restaurant to host a sales dinner at, maybe you want to travel a lot, maybe in person is for you. If you're somebody that is looking to learn about kind of how like event marketing as a business works, more of the like digital and promotional aspects of things, kind of playing around with digital engagement, maybe that's more of a route you want to go. I think that there is there's definitely like more of a social side to in person. And I think that that's important for some people day to day, right? Like, as we've seen in the new world, some people want to go to an office and some people don't.
Yeah.
And some people want to go to the office sometimes and sometimes they don't want to go. So, like, you know, we are lucky that we have the luxury to have these kind of transferable skills. And, you know, I think the other thing is to say is like, try it out, right? Especially if you're getting into it. If you hate it, switch. Like, that's the best part about like our lives and our careers and what we can do for work is we can always just switch roles, right? These event marketing, event professional skills are super transferable to all sorts of areas in a business.
I love that answer. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
With quiet quitting and burnout being an evergreen topic in our industry, how have you handled work-life balance?
Oh, okay. This is one of my favorite questions because, as you can tell, I'm not quiet about a lot of stuff. Um, but the one of the biggest things that I did in my kind of like mid early career was I took a year off. And I know that a lot of people can't do that. I saved up like every spare cent that I had. I was ready to leave New York City. I wanted to explore the country, see if I wanted to live in another place, see if I wanted to do another thing. So technically, I quit my job, and I lived in a van with my partner for a year. We traveled around the U.S. We did a lot of whooping. We volunteered on farms. We hiked, we camped, we visited all of our friends and family, and we did it for a year. And it was like the most amazing reset ever, right? Like, I was running 30 to 40 events a year, traveling 2 to 3 weeks out of every month.
Whoa.
And I needed a reset, right? And I was super fortunate to be able to do that.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you were able to do that. 30 events. That's crazy.
Yeah, we ran a lot of events. Sometimes it was just me, sometimes it was a team of two. Um, but you know, you learn a lot in those areas, in those times, like those real hustle times. And I think that's like another thing to note for burnout and when we talk about quiet quitting, it's like event folks, somebody told me this at some point, and I don't know where this stat came from. I'm sure you've heard it a ton of times, Dora, but like event professionals have like one of like the top 5 most stressful jobs in the world.
It was a Forbes article.
Where does that come from?
Yes.
Okay.
It was actually in a real article. At first when I heard it, I was like, that's fake. This is hard, but that's fake.
That's fake.
But yeah,
right.
It's a real article. Yeah.
And like, so that's the thing is like, it is a known fact that this is a stressful, hard, like unbelievably difficult job to do. And, you know, I think that like for me, especially like I've been remote pre-pandemic. So I started remote full time in 2016. I really try to keep strict hours. It doesn't always work, but I try. I actually do not have Slack or email on my phone, which is also really hard and is like definitely a learning curve. My team, people I work with, the folks I work with closest, they know I need an answer from Elena. I am going to text her. Like, it is important enough to text her, and you kind of put that barrier of like someone thinking
Mm-hmm.
I am going to physically text somebody on their personal device if I
Yeah.
need an answer. And if you do, that is fine. No problem. I got an answer for you. But like the having dedication from your team, your managers of what is actually urgent. And like, right now I'm working on a global team. So like boundaries are important, right? We work with folks in over in London, we work with folks over in San Francisco. Like, and then like the other thing is like actually take your vacation time. That's something that, especially in this role, you don't necessarily always have a lot of time because like you know, there's seasonality to events. So, like, why are all the conferences in the spring or the fall?
Yeah.
I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you're not in that hustle zone, like, take your PTO, take your sick time. If you're sick in an event, you're not going to get better unless you take the time to rest.
Right.
Like in those times, like I love the end of December and early January because you know what that means? That means like I can start the day later, I can leave earlier, I can take a 2 hour lunch break, I can schedule all my doctor's appointments, might go to the dentist, things that like you physically cannot do when you're running live events. And it's the same for digital, right? A lot of stuff is like happens in these kind of like 4 week sprints. And so when you're in a sprint, there's a lot of hustle around what you have to do, but it's key really to take the time when you can to do that and like really try to maintain the routines around stopping early, stopping at a normal time, not checking your email late into the night, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Oh man, I hope that someday I have the strength that you do to just remove Slack. I do actually delete Slack and email when I go on vacation. I remove it from
Oh,
my
that's great.
remove temptation, but when I'm not on
Yes.
vacation, it's
And it's like a temptation, right? You like notice and I will say I have had Slack and email on my phone plenty of times, but like it is your finger like hovers like, oh, what should I look at on my phone? Is it the weather app? Oh no, I'm just going to quickly check my work app.
right.
And usually it's just something that like gets your mind thinking about something that's not your kind of like your personal time after work.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I'm going to close out with my usual fun question. Share a memory or experience from a super cool event that you've been a part of, whether as somebody who is executing it or as an attendee.
Okay, I love this question. And I will say that I was like racking my brain for something that was cooler than what I'm going to say that I had produced, but I couldn't think of anything because the coolest thing I'd ever been to was I was at this conference called Splunk Conf. It was for like an IT tech company. And it was in Orlando. And I feel sometimes a certain way about going to events in Orlando. But um, the best part is that for the party, they rented out the entire Universal Studios for 3 hours.
What?
And a lot of times for like, especially for user conferences, folks don't like invite the partners or the booth folks, and
Yeah.
and they invited everybody,
What?
which was amazing. So it was um and then of course everyone was exhausted and my team was like, oh, we don't want to go, like whatever. And I was like, no, we're going. I've never been here, I'm never going to come back here, like let's do it, it's totally free. So you got on a bus, you showed your badge at the gate, the place was empty. It was probably like a 20,000 person conference, but say like maybe half showed.
Yeah.
And that's still like not that much for Universal Studios.
Right.
Um, no lines at the rides. They had free food and drink all around. There was Harry Potter Land World, whatever it's called. Um, and it was just like such an amazing time. It was a great like team bonding moment for like the events folks at the booth and all the folks that were working the trade show with me. And it was just magical, and it was like such a nice thing for this company to do, to like invite everybody instead of being exclusive to like certain parts. And like I know money and budgets can't always accommodate for that, but you felt really included in the community that they had built. And that was the reason why they were doing the conference. And bonus, we got to go to Universal Studios.
Yeah. I would love to know how much it costs to rent Universal.
Wouldn't we all, right?
Oh, that's a dream I have someday when I'm a millionaire to rent
Yeah.
Universal Studios for my friends. Maybe
Yeah.
the person in Maine who won that billion mega millions a couple weeks ago, maybe they'll have a party with their closest friends at Universal Studios. What a
I
wow.
love
That's
it.
such a great answer. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It was so fun.
Yeah. Um, and Orlando I feel like we went to Orlando a lot in our Macmillan San Francisco
Yes.
days
Yes, we
and
did.
never did anything that cool.
No, no, we didn't. Maybe they are doing stuff cool post-pandemic. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Elena. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot from you today. I know all of our listeners will be so thrilled to hear this. And thank you to all of our listeners and Meeting Protocol fans for checking out this episode. Don't forget to check out meetingprotocol.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter that includes links to these podcasts, a CMP tip of the month, as well as tons of resources for all things related to meeting professionals and CMPs. Thanks.
Thanks.